We hear about it in our marriages. Communication matters. But we don't often hear that same sentiment for parenting, yet we communicate with our kids every single day. Well, my next guest says that when it comes to communicating in families, we want to focus less on agreeing and more on understanding. Studio 5 parenting contributor Heather Johnson is joining me in studio. Great to see you as always. Communication in families. We could do better.
We could do better. Communication in families is important there, just like marriages, just like anywhere, right? Workplace. Communication lets us feel safe. It's how we get to know each other. It's how we connect with one another. It's how, again, we express and come to know likes and dislikes. It's how we solve problems. It's how we comfort. Communication is at the root of anything positive in a healthy relationship.
It's also happening all the time and at a frantic pace. So if I'm someone, Heather, who, as we lean into your advice today and your wisdom, wants to improve in this area, where is a time of day or a point in my day that I might want to hit the brakes and pay attention to how I'm communicating? I can't watch every single word just based on the pace of life, right? And the briskness of the day. But where could I pause and really focus on this practice?
If we're going to focus, because really you do want to work to always be open-minded to this communication. Regardless of overwhelm, regardless of the time of day.
Okay.
Remember, crossroads are always a really great place for this to be important.
Going to
when
school.
Your kids wake up,
okay.
When you pick them up from school, when you're sitting around a dinner table, when you're putting them to bed. That is a huge one for teenagers, so be really open-minded.
Okay.
I know all of us with teenagers are going, oh, but I'm so tired, and you want to talk at night. Those are really good places to focus on the communication. The really beautiful thing about communication that's a byproduct is when we work to communicate, which means to understand someone else, they are more likely to care about understanding us in return. Now look at this in a family setting. There is nothing more that we want as parents. We want their happiness, we want their goodness, we want their success. We also want them to learn from us, right? We've had these experiences and we have perspectives and wisdom, and we want to share that. And one of the very best ways for them to hear us is for us to communicate that we understand them first. And so the benefits of this, they're huge. You want to know how to communicate with your kids? Understand them first. And that's really this very first point that we're going to switch. Often when someone hears we don't have to agree, they go, what do you mean we don't have to agree?
I'm right.
I thought we have to agree, right? Now think about it. In the relationships you have, if you always agreed, we wouldn't have any relationships. If that was a requirement for a marriage or for a family to work or for extended family to hang out, if I had to agree with my in-laws, right? There wouldn't be relationships.
But this piece of advice, stop trying to agree, again, it's something we often hear applied to more mature relationships like a marriage or like an in-law dynamic. This is a shift, I think, and it would be for me as a parent to think that we don't have to agree, because as a parent, I do have the wisdom and the experience, and I have the answers a lot of the time. So where does the lack of agreement get in the way?
Yeah, so let's take an example. Let's look at a situation like one of your kids wants to hang out with a specific friend.
Okay.
You don't agree with that friend. You don't want them to hang out with that friend. So instead of combating, I don't want you to hang out with that friend, and giving them our wisdom or our perspective, our opinion, which if someone said that to one of us, we would immediately shut down. It wouldn't build communication. It would close those walls of communication. I can understand, though, what it's like to want friends. I can understand how important it is to feel accepted in a friend group. And so if I can respond to our 7-year-old or our teenager, and when they say, I want to hang out with that person, my response instead is, hey, I know friends really do matter, don't they? Now all of a sudden I've understood them. I didn't agree with her, but I've understood, and the understanding opens up the doors. So she'll talk to me more. So we are letting go of the agreeing. You don't have to agree. You do need to understand, though. And when we do, they want to understand in return. They do.
As we try to be better communicators as parents, you say we can lean into clues or cues.
We're going to lean into those emotional, those cues or clues that they're giving us that something's going on in communication. So I'm going to give you some really good ones. We want to start looking for them. First, we're going to look for any negative emotion that's going up. So anytime in your kids or a family member, you see those negative emotions going up, something is going on.
Dial in.
Right then and there. There is no reason. We don't walk around with negative emotion, you know, flying out of our mouths or off of our bodies if something isn't happening.
I mean, do teenagers, though, with the hormones and the up and down unpredictable behavior patterns a little bit?
Yeah, there can be some hormonal, right, that's impacting that. But really, it tends to still mean they're not feeling understood. And those are the other cues you're looking for. If negative emotion is going up, then trust and understanding is going down. Those things are inversely related. So anytime you see that negative emotion going up out of a toddler, a teenager, a spouse, immediately go, they don't feel understood. We can't go wrong assuming that. If it's hormones, great.
Okay.
But we can't go wrong in building understanding. So we want to look for those cues all the time. Another really great cue to look for is if you have a child or a teenager, a spouse consistently repeating themselves, they're most likely fighting to be understood. If I feel understood, I don't need to say it to you again. And if I feel understood the second time, I don't need to say it to you again.
This is good.
But when we don't feel understood, we argue the point again, and we make the point again.
We try to come in from the
We
left
make it
and the
again.
right and the back. Yes, that's a great point.
We do. So if you start to hear that repetition, and it's interesting, start recognizing it in yourself.
I'm thinking of it in myself.
And we can hear it and go, well, that's exactly why I repeat myself.
No one's
you
hearing
don't
me.
get it yet,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So we want to let go of that in ourselves, and we also want to recognize in others, if the repetition is there, clue in. Go, wait a second, I've got to build understanding. Remember, when we build the connection and the communication, the negative emotion goes down, right? Which is why no agreeing, just understanding, and then look for those cues. It will help a ton.
I love that.
We also want to make sure there's a balance here. When we look at how families communicate, they're constantly trying to balance two things. They're trying to balance conversation and conformity. Now, to let you know how we measure those or what we're looking at, conversation is a family's ability to talk about anything, topics at any time, just to converse.
Okay.
Conformity is referring to the person in the family who gets to make ultimate decisions, like a parent. And so we want to be balancing those two things in our family communication. We want to make sure that there's a very good balance of we can talk about anything and everyone's opinion is heard. And also, there are a set of parents or a mom or a dad who does have a say. And when those get out of balance, we can't communicate.
I love that so much because I think walking out of a conversation, again, as we try to lean into this practice and this challenge you're putting on the table to be a better communicator, better communicators as parents, that's a good litmus test. After the conversation, was there a balance between conformity and conversation? I love that.
We need that. We need that balance. There are times when parents do need to make the decisions.
Right.
But we can still make decisions and balance it with everyone getting to be heard. So we're balancing those things.
That's so smart.
Then, if there is a singular thing that builds a foundation of communication in a family system, it's empathy. It's this ability to put ourselves in someone else's shoes. Now, we hear that term, and oftentimes, especially teenagers, kids, they have a hard time going, well, how do I put myself in your shoes? I've never been in your shoes. It's also hard for us as parents to look back and go, I don't remember being 10. And if we try to remember it, we usually remember it pretty skewed. And so we want to have empathy. The way we're going to do it, if you want to have empathy for members of your family so you can communicate, we first have to stop judging. We can't have empathy for a family member or anyone if we're judging, if the way they're looking at something or the way they're feeling is okay. The other thing with empathy that we have to do is we have to see it as their truth. The way they're expressing it, if they say math is too hard, we have to see that as their truth if we're going to give them empathy. If we can't give them empathy, we cannot communicate with someone else, right? We can't communicate. That lack of empathy means that we have our own walls up. We're too busy trying to teach or defend, or we've made it about us. And so it limits our ability to actually understand another person. If we can start with empathy, we can do anything if empathy sits at our foundation when it comes to communication.
Heather, beautiful. Thank you so much. This is one of those golden foundational parenting conversations that I'm going to remember and review. You can do that as well through the Studio 5 website, where you'll also find Heather's contact information for counseling. Thanks again. Good chat.